Australia. The name itself conjures images of a land sculpted by sun, sand, and survival. It's a continent renowned for its wild, untamed heart and creatures that seem plucked from the pages of a fantasy novel. Here, you'll find spiders the size of dinner plates, snakes with venom potent enough to stop a human heart in minutes, and sharks that patrol the coastlines with silent, deadly grace. This is a place where every living thing seems to be in a constant, high-stakes battle for existence. It's a reputation well-earned, a testament to the raw, unfiltered power of nature. But even in this land of lethal legends, a new kind of monster arrived, one that didn't play by the established rules. This newcomer wasn't a native predator honed over millennia of evolution. It arrived as an outsider, an invader with a toxic secret. It was the cane toad, a warty, unassuming amphibian with a voracious appetite and a deadly defense mechanism. At first glance, it might not seem as immediately threatening as a great white shark or a saltwater crocodile. There are no giant teeth or constricting coils. But its threat was far more insidious, a slow-acting poison seeping into the very fabric of Australia's delicate ecosystems. This bumpy-skinned creature was about to unleash an ecological catastrophe on a scale few could have ever predicted. The danger of the cane toad lies in its toxicity. Glands on its shoulders produce a milky white venom, a potent cocktail of toxins called bufotoxin. For the native predators of Australia, the goannas, the quolls, the snakes, and even the crocodiles, this was an evolutionary curveball they were utterly unprepared for. These animals, which had evolved to hunt and eat native frogs, saw the cane toad as just another easy meal. But one bite, one curious lick, was often enough to deliver a fatal dose. The invader had a secret weapon, and Australia's own wildlife had no defense against it. Against the backdrop of Australia's already extreme wildlife, the cane toad stood out as a uniquely devastating force. It wasn't just another dangerous animal in a land full of them. It was a biological wrecking ball, disrupting food chains and poisoning the landscape wherever it hopped. Its relentless march across the continent began to feel unstoppable, a seemingly permanent scar on the face of this ancient land. The experts were stumped. Traps, fences, and community roundups barely made a dent. Australia, a continent defined by its tough survivors, was facing a foe it just couldn't seem to beat. A new hero was desperately needed. The story of the cane toad in Australia is a classic tale of good intentions gone horribly wrong. It all started back in 1935 in the lush sugarcane fields of northern Queensland. Farmers were locked in a desperate battle with the grey-backed cane beetle and the Frenchy beetle, native insects that were decimating their valuable crops. Looking for a solution, they turned to a method that seemed promising at the time: biological control. The idea was simple: introduce a natural predator of the beetles to manage their numbers without the need for chemical pesticides. The chosen warrior for this agricultural crusade was the cane toad, Rhinella marina. With high hopes, just over 100 toads were imported from Hawaii and released into the cane fields. It was hailed as a brilliant, modern solution to a persistent agricultural problem. Scientists and farmers believed the toads would stay in the fields, feasting on the destructive beetles and saving the sugar industry. Unfortunately, they overlooked a few critical details. Cane toads are primarily ground-dwelling creatures, whereas the beetles they were meant to eat spent most of their time on the upper stalks of the sugarcane. Furthermore, the toads couldn't jump very high. The intended predator and its prey barely ever crossed paths. The project was a catastrophic failure from the very beginning. The toads didn't control the beetles, but they found the Australian environment to be an absolute paradise. With few natural predators, an abundance of other food sources like insects and small vertebrates, and a remarkable ability to reproduce, their population exploded. A single female cane toad can lay up to 30,000 eggs at a time, twice a year. The initial 102 toads quickly became thousands, then millions, then billions. They began an inexorable march from the fields of Queensland, spreading west south, and north at an astonishing rate. What began as a localized experiment soon spiraled into a continent-wide invasion. The toads advanced across the landscape at a rate of up to 60 kilometers per year, a wave of toxic amphibians conquering new territory with every wet season. Their spread seemed unstoppable, a biological firestorm consuming everything in its path. They crossed state borders, navigated deserts, and infiltrated national parks, including the world-famous Kakadu. The decision made in 1935, born from a desire to protect a crop, had unleashed one of the most infamous and destructive invasive species events in modern history. The true horror of the cane toad invasion wasn't just their ever-expanding numbers. It was the devastating impact they had on Australia's unique and precious wildlife. The continent's native predators had spent millions of years evolving in a world without bufotoxin. They had no instinct to avoid these new poisonous arrivals. For many species, their first encounter with a cane toad was also their last. The ecological ripple effect was immediate and catastrophic, creating what scientists grimly refer to as a predator-free environment wherever the toads established themselves in high densities. Some of Australia's most iconic animals were hit the hardest. The northern quoll, a beautiful and feisty carnivorous marsupial, saw its populations plummet by as much as 95% in areas overrun by toads. These inquisitive predators would attempt to eat the toads, only to succumb to their potent venom. Large goannas, or monitor lizards, which are key apex predators in many ecosystems, suffered similar catastrophic declines. Entire populations of these magnificent reptiles were wiped out, leaving a gaping hole in the local food web. Even freshwater crocodiles were not immune, with younger, smaller crocs dying after attempting to consume the toxic amphibians. The destruction didn't stop there. The toads are indiscriminate eaters, consuming a vast array of insects, snails, and even small native frogs and lizards, outcompeting native species for vital food resources. They also carry diseases and parasites that can spill over into native amphibian populations, adding yet another layer of pressure on already vulnerable species. The very sound of the bush began to change. The calls of certain frogs grew fainter, the rustle of a goanna in the undergrowth became a rarity, and the once vibrant ecosystems fell eerily silent in the wake of the toad's advance. It was a silent, toxic wave washing the life out of the landscape. For decades, it seemed there was no answer. The cane toad was an ecological nightmare with no apparent solution. They were too numerous, too resilient, and too toxic. They had conquered vast swathes of the country, from the tropical wetlands of the north to the drier savannas of the west. The ecological damage was immense and seemingly irreversible. Australia's wildlife was in a desperate fight against an enemy it couldn't see coming and couldn't defeat. The continent was losing the war, and hope was beginning to fade. A hero was needed, but no one expected it to come from so low to the ground. Just when the situation seemed most dire, a surprising and formidable warrior emerged from the Australian soil itself. This champion wasn't large, it wasn't venomous in the traditional sense, and it certainly wasn't a new scientific invention. It was the native meat ant, Iridomyrmex purpureus. These are not your average picnic-raiding ants. Meat ants are large, aggressive, and highly organized social insects, known for their iridescent purple-green sheen and their ferocious nature. They are a dominant force in many Australian ecosystems, building massive, interconnected underground nests that can house hundreds of thousands of individuals. Meat ants are renowned for their territorial and predatory behavior. They hunt and scavenge with ruthless efficiency, working together in coordinated armies to overwhelm prey many times their own size. A fallen beetle, a sick lizard, or an unfortunate grasshopper that strays too close to their nest is quickly swarmed, subdued, and dismembered by a relentless tide of powerful mandibles. Their colonies are like sprawling city-states, with complex networks of trails and a clear social structure. They are the cleanup crew of the outback, and their presence is a sign of a healthy, functioning ecosystem. They play a crucial role in nutrient cycling and controlling insect populations. What makes meat ants particularly interesting in the fight against cane toads is their unique defense. While they don't have a sting, they can deliver a painful bite and, more importantly, spray formic acid. This chemical weapon is highly irritating and can be lethal to smaller creatures, especially amphibians with their sensitive, permeable skin. Scientists began to observe a fascinating phenomenon. In areas where meat ant nests were abundant, the number of young cane toads seemed to be significantly lower. Could these tiny native insects hold the key to controlling the giant, toxic invader? It was a tantalizing possibility. The idea was almost poetic. For decades, humans had tried and failed to control the cane toad with traps, fences, and high-tech solutions. All the while, a natural-born killer was already living in the soil, perfectly adapted to the Australian environment, and possessing the perfect weapons for the job. The meat ant wasn't a silver bullet introduced by humans. It was part of the ecosystem's own immune system, fighting back against a foreign invader. The stage was set for a David and Goliath battle, and scientists were eager to see just how effective this tiny titan could be. Armed with these compelling observations, researchers from the University of Sydney, led by Professor Rick Shine, decided to put the meat ants to the test. They designed a series of clever and controlled experiments to scientifically measure the interaction between the ants and the toads. They needed to know if this was just a random occurrence or a consistent, reliable form of biological control. The core of their research focused on the most vulnerable stage of the cane toad's life cycle, the metamorphs. These are the tiny, newly morphed toadlets, barely a centimetre long, as they leave the water for the first time to begin their life on land. The experiments were straightforward, yet ingenious. Researchers located ponds where cane toads had laid their eggs. As the tadpoles developed and began to morph into tiny toadlets, the scientists set up their study sites. In some areas, they placed small amounts of food, like cat food, near the water's edge to attract and concentrate the local meat ant populations. In other similar areas, they left the ant populations undisturbed as a control group. The goal was to see if actively luring the ants to the toadlets' exit points would make a significant difference in their survival rates. The results were nothing short of astonishing. As the vulnerable toadlets emerged from the water, they hopped directly into a gauntlet of waiting meat ants. The ants, drawn by the bait and fiercely territorial, immediately identified the tiny amphibians as intruders or potential food. They swarmed the toadlets in overwhelming numbers. Using their powerful mandibles to grip the toad's soft skin and spraying them with formic acid, the ants quickly attacked. The acid was devastating to the young toads, burning their sensitive skin and disrupting their ability to breathe and absorb water. The tiny invaders were completely defenseless against this coordinated chemical assault. The effectiveness was brutal and incredibly high. In the areas where meat ants had been attracted, the survival rate of the young cane toads plummeted. The ants were observed killing the toadlets with remarkable speed and efficiency, often dispatching them in less than a minute. Researchers watched as the ants attacked, killed, and then carried the small carcasses back to their nests. Within a short period, the ground was cleared of the emerging toadlets. The study revealed that these native ants could wipe out a huge percentage of the next generation of cane toads before they even had a chance to grow, breed, and spread their poison. The success of the scientific trials was not just a fascinating laboratory result, it translated into real, tangible changes in the wild. In the regions around the Northern Territory where these studies were conducted, the impact was profound and visible. The most immediate outcome was a massive drop in the survival rates of young cane toads. By targeting them at their most vulnerable post-metamorphic stage, the meat ants were effectively severing the toad's life cycle. Fewer young toads meant fewer adult toads in the following seasons, leading to a significant reduction in the overall toad population density in these areas. With the pressure from the invasive toads easing, Australia's native wildlife began to show incredible signs of recovery. Species that had been decimated began to bounce back. The northern quoll, once on the brink of local extinction in many toad-infested areas, started to reappear. With fewer toxic toads to tempt them, their survival rates improved, and their populations began to stabilize and even grow. This was a monumental victory, as the recovery of a key predator, like the quoll, signals a return to a more balanced and healthy ecosystem. It was a sign that the food web was beginning to mend itself. Other native animals also benefited. Populations of monitor lizards, including the large yellow-spotted monitor, which had been hit incredibly hard, also showed signs of a comeback. These lizards are vital to the ecosystem, and their return indicated that the predator-free void created by the toads was being refilled by its rightful native occupants. Even smaller snakes and other reptiles that had suffered began to increase in number. The entire ecosystem seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief as the toxic blanket of the cane toad invasion began to lift in these targeted locations. The early signs of healing were incredibly promising. The research demonstrated that by simply encouraging a native species to do what it does best, it was possible to turn the tide in a battle that had seemed hopeless for over 80 years. It wasn't about introducing another foreign species or using widespread chemicals. It was about understanding the intricate connections within the native ecosystem and using that knowledge to our advantage. The ants weren't just killing toads, they were restoring balance, proving that nature, when given a chance, has a remarkable capacity to heal itself from even the most devastating wounds. Of course, with any powerful biological control method, there are important questions and concerns to address. The primary worry was whether encouraging meat ants to be more predatory could have unintended negative consequences for other native species. Would these supercharged ant colonies start attacking native frogs, small lizards, or other ground-dwelling creatures with the same ferocity? It was a critical question that required careful investigation. The last thing anyone wanted was to solve one invasive species problem by creating another ecological imbalance, repeating the very mistake that brought the cane toads to Australia in the first place. Fortunately, extensive research and continued observation have provided reassuring answers. Scientists discovered that native Australian frogs and other small animals have co-evolved with meat ants for millions of years. They have developed sophisticated behavioral adaptations to avoid the ants. For instance, native frogs are much better at detecting the chemical signals of the ants and are far more agile and quick to escape, unlike the naive and clumsy cane toadlets. Studies showed that the ants overwhelmingly targeted the cane toads, largely ignoring the native fauna that knew how to stay out of their way. The ants were not a blunt instrument, but a surprisingly precise weapon. This discovery represents a paradigm shift in how we think about managing invasive species. For decades, the approach was often to fight fire with fire, sometimes with disastrous results. The story of the meat ant and the cane toad offers a more elegant and sustainable path, using nature's own solutions. It highlights the importance of deep ecological knowledge, of understanding the complex relationships between native species and leveraging those ancient dynamics to restore balance. It proves that sometimes the most powerful tool is not a new technology, but a deeper appreciation for the intricate workings of the natural world. The battle against the cane toad is far from over, but for the first time in a long time, there is a genuine sense of hope. The meat ant is not a magic bullet that will eradicate every toad from the continent, but it is a powerful, self-sustaining and ecologically safe ally in the fight. This story is an inspiring testament to the resilience of nature. It shows that even when faced with a seemingly unstoppable foe, the answers might be hidden right under our feet. For Australia's beleaguered wildlife, the humble meat ant has become a symbol of defiance and a beacon of hope for a wilder, healthier future.